2024. Can y'all believe another year has already passed us? I don't know about y'all, but 2024 has been good to me. And I'm looking forward to another year. So thank you all for joining us for this conversation today, this panel. We have an exciting guest array of hosts. We have many generations represented here today. And our conversation is going to be about intergenerational connections in our community and the value of that. And as a Black community, how important it is to preserve those connections and those relationships and the power that we have in our connectivity. So my name is Taylor Mary Weberfield. I am, oh my goodness, I do so many things in the community. Right now, my current role is the founder and lead consultant of True Heart Consulting, where I have a deep, deep passion for social justice, but also self-care, because we can't actualize justice without us being well and healthy. And so the strength of our community is very much a part of that. And so I'm excited to dive into this conversation today. So I'll be moderating. I'm trying to take up too much space because we just have a lot of beautiful voices here today. So we'll start with some introductions. So if you don't mind just sharing your name, what it is you do in the world. I know all of you do so many things. And given our conversation today about intergenerational connections, I'm curious to hear about a connection outside of your own generation that has been really meaningful for you, if you don't mind saying their name, as we open up this conversation. So for me, mine is my grandmother, Ellie Weber, and so I'm bringing her into the room. She inspires so much of what I do today, including speaking in front of people. This was her bread and butter. So I'll pass the mic on.
Interesting that you brought up your grandmother, because that's actually one that is somebody that resonates with me as well. My name is Mark Lee. I'm one of the staff members here at the Hayti Heritage Center, also a historian here in the area. But my grandmother, Molly Houston Lee, was actually the founder of the Richard B. Harrison Library in Raleigh, North Carolina. So she was actually doing that at a time when a lot of folks were not having a library in our community, and she actually went into that community and raised money in order to create the first African American library that still exists to this day. So she definitely resonates a lot with me and all along those lines.
I'm just a nobody, trying to tell everybody about somebody.
Who can save anybody?
Who can save anybody? Hi y'all, my name is Geraldine Alshami. I'm an education advocate, social justice advocate. Now been 50 years. Seen so many decades of change. I have done so many things, including working with children, working with parents, working with advocating for seniors, so I won't even try to name all those things. And I'm still here, still tick-tocking along the way, so wonderful to be here with you on this happy Kwanzaa and Umoja.
Greetings. I am Dr. Nooney Davis, and I am the daughter of Sylvia Davis over there, my mother, and my two grandmothers had a lot of influence on me. I watched them as I grew up. They were instrumental in Noni, whom I'm named after, was the first one in her generation to go to college, and we have so many folks who went to college on that side who obviously were inspired by her. And then the other one, my grandmother Minnie, was an entrepreneur. And so my mother and I started St. Sia Academy. This is our 28th year. It's an African-centered school that we have been operating on a shoestring budget. But we have had we hope, a tremendous influence on our community. And so that's what I do. I own and operate. A legacy owner, because my mom and my dad started it, the late William Edward Davis, and with my aunties and all of that. And so I'm a legacy owner of an African-centered school here.
Hello, I'm Emmanuel Whittington Kinsey. I'm recently graduated. I was homeschooled, so a big person who has been, a big influence is obviously my mom, and then also Limo Vincide, who is in my homeschool community, who has, as someone older, has brought out a lot of my own, personal curiosities and has helped me explore those. And so I feel like she's really big in that certain way for me.
Hi everybody, my name is James Stewart. I'm a Durham native. My current work is with Parks and Recreation, planning special events, but I'm very new in that space. My previous work at a company where I cleansed people's homes and also led community events steeped in the tradition of root work, but Black spirituality, and two elders that I look up to greatly today, one being my mother. The family events that she would pull people together and hold space for people, both individually and group-wise, and then community events that I've watched her plan events, and then my great-grandfather, who was a pastor, and the work that he did in holding space for people and just showing up and essentially getting out of the way to let the work be done.
Hi everyone, my name is Valerie. I felt compelled to introduce myself as a integrative neuroscience student. I think I want to, when I was thinking about our moderator and bringing health to our community, I think the journey that I've been compelled to go on to bring health to the community has been through our mental health and through understanding our biology and bringing us representation in the scientific field. I think that's something that I'm very interested in doing. I think when I thought about an ancestor that has inspired me, I couldn't think of one that is that far off, but I think I immediately thought of my mom. I think a lot of the books on Black history and Egyptian history, in my house, as well as her starting Empowered Minds Academy, was something that really influenced my connection to activism and my Black identity.
Great. Thank you all so much. As y'all can see, we got a diversity of perspectives and opinions here, so I'm excited to dig into it. So the way this will go, I'll have some questions for the group. I'll have some pointed questions just based on folks' expertise. And we'll chime in as we feel compelled. And then also there'll be opportunity for you all to ask some questions as well. So if something comes up, write it down on your mental and hold on to it till we get through. So, okay, so the first question is for everybody. So I think that we can conjure up some mental images from our lived experience of what it looks like, what a healthy intergenerational connection looks like, whether that be from your family or your community. And so I'm curious, when you think about a healthy and thriving community that's connected across the generations, what does that look like? What are some examples from your lived experience that you would call forward? And so for me, the electric slide for me just embodies intergenerational connection, right? It's something that we passed down, I don't know how many generations, I'm sure there was some iteration of it back in Africa, right? And we pass it down and it always comes forward as just this joyous thing that, don't show up if you don't know, right? And so that's one of the images that calls up for me, and it just kind of embodies the joy of our connection, the spirit of our connection, and what it means to be in celebration of our community. So I'm curious for you all, what are some of those examples? What does it look like for you? And yeah, what does that mean?
In a short version.
Short version. What does a healthy intergenerational connection look like to you? And if you have any, I do have a tendency to do that. Thank you.
Well, I was just going to share one really quickly and everything. I am fortunate or unfortunate, depending on your point of view, to not have any kids of my own, but I have two nephews that are 15 and 16 as of this past August. And I remember when they were young gentlemen, and they're actually literally toddlers. My dad, who many of you know, as an artist here in the area, Jim Lee, was actually showing them artwork and showing them the wonders of Mother Nature. So a lot of people would say that that's something that young folks can't get into, because there are some scientists that would say that the brain isn't developed, but he was not one to have that kind of attitude. So he was actually showing them the connection that we have to Mother Earth at a very young age. He was doing that literally at the time that they were probably like 4 or 5 months old. So seeing him walking around with those young men that are now 15 and 16 and seeing that that has helped them grow into the fine gentlemen that they are now.
Thank you. You know, I think my experience probably is rooted and grounded right here on the stage. I think years ago, not that many years ago, but years ago, I saw the need in my community when I began to see black boys being hustled off into the school, what I called then the homeschool prison cycle. And I wanted to do something, and so I first started with the boxing program. I didn't know a thing in the world about boxing, but I connected with young people. I connected with the energy of anger that they had, and I wanted to do something to help them kind of take that anger and redirect it somewhere else. That began a journey for me, and everything had to do mostly with. I mean, I've done other work, but this was more important to me. This was the most important. So the whole thing with helping kids find their voice, find their roots, and I think one of the most important things that kids who are adult children who are now 37 and 40 talk about is their experience with Baba Chuck. We did a 3-year residency in Wilson County, and where we had four different ensembles of kids that we taught the drum, and they range from different ages. You know, we had our little babies who were like 5 to 8 or 5 to 10, and then you had your 10 to 14, and then you had your 14 to 18, and then you had the adults. And so that was one of the most beautiful intergenerational experiences that I've had, you know, and I would love to have it again, because that was a beautiful time. My grandson, I've lived to see 10 decades, 10 decades. So watching, being a great grandmama, watching my children, well, actually watching my grandmother, who was my grandmother who was a slave, my mother, myself, my children, my grandchildren, and now my great-grandchildren. That's just as intergenerational as you're gonna get. So being able to connect with them and still keep in time, and still they teach me, I teach them, and I think that's probably the most powerful experience that I've had.
Well, I did say that we have a school, and so I have parents who have infants who attend our school. So our intergenerational event is every day at lunchtime. So we have the babies, and we have the toddlers, and we have the kindergartners, preschoolers, and the kindergartners, and everybody is at the playground area at the same time with the elders. So I experience that almost every day, watching older kids make sure little people are swinging, making sure someone got their lunchbox, somebody's shoe is tied, stop, you ain't supposed to do that, get down, come over here, why are you crying, let me, take care of your tears. Did you eat your lunch? You need to put your stuff away, put your coat on, baby, all of that. Every day.
That's right.
and sincere is the intergenerational moment. And sometimes my mom comes out, and when we're doing rehearsals for like John Canoe or our play, she gets to sit there and watch everybody from 2, 3, all the way through the adults who are monitoring them. So yeah, that's our everyday experience.
To me, I think that intergenerational community, or a healthy intergenerational community, is one where everyone has their own inner worlds, and I think that in a healthy space, everyone's inner world would be able to be fully represented and fully expressed without being subordinated to someone else's inner world or being stifled in any sort of way. And so I think that an example for me for when I felt this sort of healthy intergenerational community is very similar. I've been a part of a homeschooling group for the majority of my life, and there was always this encouragement to interact with everyone and to make everyone feel welcome. And through this, when people would come into the group, they would also sort to take on that culture. And so people from the oldest people there to the very youngest were all interacting with everyone. And so whether you're helping a kid out on the playground, or you are talking to someone older about their lived experiences or just their interests or whatnot, there was always a sense of my inner world being respected, and then getting to see these other people's inner world in the way that they express that. And I think that that is a very integral part of a healthy community.
For me, I want to quickly go over like 2, I guess, things that come to mind. One being cooking in my family. From when I was little, like watching my grandma make things like cornbread, and what sticks out in my mind is her peach cobbler recipe, where it was this like big deal for her to teach me that, and when I got access to learn it, it was just like it wasn't even about the recipe per se, it was about the experience and all these things that are happening. And I think about like when you get to cook with elders, it's not so much about the recipe. I mean, it is, but it's also about what's being communicated and what's being taught in those moments that carries on. And there's a continuum, there's a lineage that's being connected. And in hindsight, I'm like, oh, I was able to step into that moment. Something bigger than me and family was happening. And then on another side, we have a lot of wood on our land. And when I was growing up, I hated chopping wood. I always wanted to like get out of it. And growing up, I realized that that too was part of the same sort of intergenerational continuum that I had to step into. And this year I was like, oh my God, my dad taught me how to chop a tree down completely. And there was this sort of like passing the torch moment on. And these sort of like, yeah, you could find somebody to do that sort of thing, but it's not about the thing, it's about what's being communicated and what's being passed on through that action. Pass it on.
Would you be able to repeat the question?
Yeah. Yeah, so the question is, what does a healthy intergenerational connection or community look like to you? And do you have any examples from your own experience that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think like what immediately came to mind was an idea of shame. I think there can be like a lot of shame like with regard to like history and like really traumatic experiences, especially ones that are racial or when we've been racialized. And I think that something that I've like heard from my mom's side of the family or even my dad's side has been like forgive and forget. There has been like a lot of forgetting, sometimes forgetting of the past, and just trying to move forward as quickly as possible. And I understand that as a survival mechanism for a lot of, at least for my experience, the older generation on my side. But I think like something that I found important is instead of forgive and forget, we need to unapologetically learn from the previous generation to fully understand ourselves. And I think that's something that would create a healthy intergenerational relationship.
Oh, see, I'm over here taking notes. Okay, it looks like we had a response. Do you wanna? Yeah, sure.
You know, as I sit here and as elders, we are answering on a whole different level than the children. You're not children, than the young people. And when I think about what a healthy intergenerational relationship is, it's give and take. Too many times we sit and we talk about this generation, all they do is on the cell phone. Well, who's buying the cell phones? You know, all they do, they so disrespectful. Well, have they been disrespected? Are they doing what they learned from us? You know, I have around my neck the Sankofa bird, and Sankofa means to go back into the history, you know, and when we go back into the history, we can find the solutions to most of our problems. And I'm not gonna have to say war horse, but my grandmother was a slave. She was 20 years old when the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, which means she was still a slave. And my grandmother she was still alive when all three of my children were born. So her first child was by the slave master. That she never got to see that child. She never got to see him. She didn't see her until she was 7 years old. So when we think about the disruption in the family starting all the way back from slavery, imagine you have a child and you never laid eyes on that child because the minute it was born, it was taken from you, put on a plantation somewhere else, and it was 7 years before you ever got to see that child again. Now, to add to that, after those 7 years, you can go to reclaim your child, but you also have to be with the man that they placed the child on the plantation with. Why? Because we can't let nobody know that who the real father of the child is. Another disruption in the family, right? Because now my grandmother, she comes right behind that, and she's got to marry this man that she don't love, or she got to be with this man that she don't love, and so she has 6 more children by him, 5 of which are boys who can who can get by. Because we loved our girls and we raised our girls and loved our boys. Was that the saying? That was the saying. And so, again, you're talking about a disruption in the family. And I want to go into something. I'm not going to go right now. You're going to let me. What I want people to understand when we talk about, there's been so many disruptions with the family, starting with slavery. Starting with your children being taken away from you and sold into slavery, your sisters, your brothers. But there's one I am so tired of hearing us talk about. I'm gonna come back to y'all in a minute, babies. But I want to get this straight. All of you who run around here keep talking about, oh, the poor folks mad with us because we got an education, and we went to school, and we got our education, and and they don't like us. Let me get you straight on that. No, that wasn't what happened. You see, what happened was that the mulatto children that were born of the white man's seed, his children, they got a chance to have an education. Women, not so much, right? Women, not so much. Y'all have to forgive me because I have these little moments every once in a while that things go, sometimes they come and sometimes they don't come back. But anyway, what I'm saying to you is when my grandmother married that or took that man and she had those 6 children, she had one little black girl. She was known as Black Angel. Now, mind you, my grandfather built the first school church in Johnson County. My grandmother, when you talk about what my roots are, my grandmother brought the teachers in to the school. My uncle served on the Board of Education. I didn't realize that it was in my destiny to do this until I was about 30-some years old. But I always heard my grandmother talk about the difference between how she was treated and my auntie. So I'm gonna cut through the chase. See, the deal was that all of you, the light-skinned children or the lighter ones, it was known that you could make it for the family. You could make things happen for the community, right? So we're gonna make sure you get educated. We're gonna make sure our light-skinned children and our boys get educated, because you're gonna come back to the community and you're gonna help the community. Now that's a covenant all across Africa. It's all across about every country that you go to where people are poor. So when you start running around and you start saying they don't like us because I got educated, you're jealous because I got educated. No, because you broke the covenant. You broke the covenant. You didn't come back. You went and you made your life, you made your living, you drove your fine cars, you lived in your fine houses, and you didn't come back. And that's what started, that's Uncle Tank, they don't mess with us, they don't mess with us. Why did they not mess with us? Because when you bought your freedom, how many of you knew that when you bought your freedom, that you could not associate with your own family? If they were not free, you could not associate with them. So therefore you got, they don't mess with us, we the poor ones, they don't mess with us, they don't come to our house, we ain't welcome at their house. And see, these young people didn't even understand what was going on. Why? Because our parents, our grandparents, we stopped telling the stories. We stopped telling the stories. I won't talk about it, I'm ashamed. So that's the breakdown between this generation and us, because we stopped talking. I'm gonna hold that right there.
That's so powerful. Yes, thank you, Mama G. If y'all didn't know, Mama G is a griot in our community, so she has so many stories like that. And we learn so much from these stories, right?
I tell people, I tell stories, I don't tell lies.
That's right. That's right. And Valerie, you brought forth a really exciting notion about unapologetically learning, right? Because some of these stories, you can hear even just from what Mama G just shared. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of hurt in stories like that, right? And sometimes we find ourselves trying to run away from that pain, not really sitting with the grief of that, so that we can learn from it. And so Mama G, actually touched on a time in our history that still has impacts to this day, right? Even around something that I've had my own challenges with, and that's our work ethic, right? We work ourselves to death, literally. Do y'all know that in this community? That's actually a really big illness in our community. And so a notion that's been passed through generations, working twice as hard to get half as much, right? Valerie, I'm curious about, in your studies around like mental health, how is that impacting us, and what are some ways you can see us disrupting that notion? And, anybody else has thoughts on that, I would love to hear.
I think the first thing that came to mind was something called oxidative stress. This is something that can accumulate within us. I don't know if you just think of cortisol, for example. This is something that can cause us to be more susceptible to disease, more susceptible to mental health conditions. And I feel like something that is a large problem is that it's completely disregarded by supremacy and white people in medicine. And I think that we need to keep our health in mind and how much stress of trying to work twice as hard can literally bring us disease. And then I think like the medical system has a lot of work to do in actually bringing support to people. I think that's it.
Thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Mel.
I was going to add to that. I think it's epigenetics that they have they've realized that a lot of the stress that we had has altered our genes. And so, but I was watching something, I think with Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson. He was speaking with a young black woman who was working on this. And she found that we are able to redirect or do something right, reprogram that gene by within a generation, because I think the example she gave was how there was malnutrition, there was in one generation, and that passed on and caused, even though that second or third generation didn't experience that trauma, that gene was there. And so for me personally, I believe that African-centered education is transformative. I think that some of the problems that we've had with schooling is that my mother's generation they were in segregated schools. So what did they learn? They had to learn curriculum, but the curriculum was not as regimented as it is now, where you have to learn these things to pass this test. So in addition to learning reading, they also learned about Langston Hughes, they learned about Frederick Douglass. So there was they knew about their own civil rights leader, W.E. Du Bois, all of these people. We had our own people in our community. What happened after integration was that now you're learning maybe Dr. King, maybe Rosa Parks, maybe Dr. George Washington Carver, but then the vast, amount of Black history that we have is gone. So you have children who are in integrated schools who don't know their own history. And so, like you were saying, they don't know who they are. And so that's another level of trauma. Wherein with our African-centered space, our children are learning Kiswahili, they're learning drum circle, they learn the continent of Africa and all of the capitals, they learn the United States, all of that, and then they have their morning affirmations. But even in the literature, all the literature is African American literature. All of it, unapologetically. We have science, we introduced 30 scientists at every unit from ages 7 up. You have to know 30 scientists of each field. Because I want you, and then I asked them, why am I doing that? They said, Mama, because you want us to think we can do anything. Boom, that's all I want you to know. You have to know that you can do anything. You're going to read African literature, you're going to learn about African scientists, you're going to learn about what Africans, how did they perceive this? And we're going to learn about insects, we're going to learn about Ethiopians who were the beekeepers, the first beekeepers, and how did they learn metamorphosis and the life cycle of these blah, 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 and then we're going to go, okay, now let's go and learn about insects like through the academic, the book part. But you're going to know what we thought about that first. And so in every single science unit. So that really recalibrates your brain. And so my whole goal is to reverse that foolishness that happened. But anyway.
I'm actually curious about something. This is actually, I can't remember your job and everything, but to the young people here on the panel and everything along those lines, because as you were just mentioning, W.E.B. Du Bois, and actually if you look here, when you go back out into the vendor market, there is a legacy of hate involved there that talks about the difference between W.E.B. Du Bois, who was very much proud of what was going on in the community, because he even talks about how you literally could have your suit made from here, you could be buried from here, you could literally be born at a hospital that was African American owned and everything, which was Lincoln Hospital. I actually was born there in '62, and then there was another gentleman that was more of a accepting of what was going on. So Booker T. Washington was not necessarily on the same level as W.E.B. Du Bois, and was definitely more of one that was about forgiving some of the sins of white race and all along those lines. So I just wanted to my young folks, how much of that have you actually been learning? Because there's even talking about the difference in, if you read that panel, because Booker T. Washington talks about how he saw a acceptance in the way that the white community accepted some of our African American leaders, as opposed to Du Bois, who was being very prideful of what we were doing in our community. So just curious to you young folks, how much of that do you remember learning in your own upbringing?
I'll say I've noticed that the way things get taught gets repurposed in a good way, and I have noticed, like, I'll hear internet conversations about how much W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington hated each other, and there's, like, you know, videos, and people pick different ways to reshare the information, and I think the batons are getting passed. We have to keep that going. We have to keep finding ways to keep telling these stories and information to generations, like our generation and then beyond. The batons are getting passed. We have to keep that going, because now more than ever, it's in danger, and there's always a threat to make us forget. Because if we forget, then we don't realize that all of this is cyclical, and it keeps coming back, and the attacks keep happening to make us forget who we are and how we've encountered a lot of these threats to just disrupting these cycles of trauma that we keep making progress in removing and healing ourselves, but it is happening.
I think when I immediately thought of W.E.B. Du Bois, W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, I think when I think of Booker T. Washington's like ideals and like morals for this community and what he wanted, I think it really just shows like a short-term like satisfaction, or like a short-term like I just keep thinking of short-term, because of course he like helped with the Tuskegee like Institute, and like of course like some things that were very like positive for the Black community, but I think the idea of respectability is very toxic, and I think it generates a sense of self-hatred and trying to only assimilate to the white culture at the time, or only seeing yourself through the lens of what white people want. And I think that W.E.B. Du Bois, I think, had maybe more of a admiration for, being okay with how we are now, and simply protecting ourselves and building space for ourselves.
I don't know if I'm as prepared to answer that specific question, but I think that from the themes that I've been hearing from my other young people on the panel, I think that as far as the not assimilating goes, and finding assurance, or not assurance, but what should I say? I think as far as, rather than assimilating to the white way, so to speak, I think that sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. I think that I think that they made very, very good points about that I don't know the word I want to use, but that self assurance, or that doing things out of ourselves, and not out of a desire to appease this other group that has existed in a position of power for a long time. And I definitely, so there's I can see a large emphasis on helping our own thing away.
That's it.
You know, young man, you were so right when you talked about how things are taught. You know, I was taught that story from a whole different perspective, but I was taught by a black man.
I'm sorry, you're
I'm sorry.
Yes,
I'm saying I was taught that story from a whole different perspective, but I was taught by a black man. And from my perspective, and I can see it today, with the division within the black race, something that we don't talk about. We deny and we act like it don't exist, and it keep right on just destroying our communities. Now, the way I understood the story was that it started from the whole thing of the whole talented 10. And that there were going to only be a certain percentage of the Negroes that was going to ever reach that height. So for me, we talking about a social class hierarchy. Now, when I come to Booker T recognized that just like today, there were food shortages, that we didn't have nothing, and his thing was about making sure that we understood how to work those farms and the whole concept and aspect of agriculture, and which is what we're leading to today. And Booker T was saying that only a tenth of us would get the chance to go abroad, to study abroad, because we ain't the white man's son. So let's tell the story the way it is. Let's tell the story the way it is, and this is what I mean when I keep saying that we don't teach our children, that we don't tell the stories. There are a lot of you in here right now that can tell some stories. And the best way that we learn about our history is to go back in our memory and remember those stories. Remember those stories that you used to hear and connect them to right now. Because a lot of times your own people won't tell you the truth.
Also, Booker T we went to Tuskegee and actually visited Dr. George Washington Carver's Museum and the Kellogg Center. And so, like, to follow what you were saying, he literally built that university with nothing but black labor. The people, the boys, you know, had to go out there and they made those bricks and they built them. So he didn't owe anybody any money when he finished it. He also had one face for this group of people, and then he had another face for the inside. So there's a legacy of him helping people escape. There's a legacy of him supporting, you know, black projects that it wasn't popularized. So he kept it secret, some of the things he was doing. So he's a complex personality. It wasn't just, you know, he has this argument, and then, you know, there's this argument with Marcus Garvey as well. So we have to, you know, understand that they all had their things, but the goal, which I think we get caught up in, is aligning ourselves with one of them instead of saying, okay, I'm gonna take this from Marcus, I'm gonna take this from WB, and I'm gonna take this from Booker T. Because all of us have to be able to see who we are and where we fit in instead of being at this, you know, well, I don't like the way you do it, and then, you know, blah, blah, blah. We can't do that. We have to overcome that and understand each of us has our role in our community, and we don't have to agree with how it happens, as long as we're doing something to lift up our people.
I just want to add, you're so right, because you had to infiltrate. You could not wear one face. You had to infiltrate. You had to be a different person here, a different person there. Now, like I said, if I had black privilege, maybe I didn't. And y'all, I'm not keep throwing that out there because I want to just keep jabbing folk. That's not why I'm throwing that out there. I'm throwing that out there because right now in our society, we are having such a difficult time with black leadership. Black leadership, because you're scared to do what you need to do, because you're scared you're going to lose your jobs. You're scared to speak up for these children who are being, I want to talk about equity, but you don't want to make sure that they're getting equity because you don't want to lose your job. You want to point your finger out at the white folks and tell the white folks y'all need to look at your prejudice and your bias and whatever, and I say to you, your thumb is back on you. Your thumb is back on you, because when we start talking about the number of children who were suspended from schools, who was doing the suspending? Who is doing the suspending? When it comes to harsher punishment, when our black kids are getting 3 times the punishment that their white children are getting for the same offense, who's doing it? Ask yourself who's doing it. We need to take it, it's called internalized race oppression. That's what it's called. And we don't want to talk about it. The Willie Lynch syndrome is the same thing. Crab in the bucket syndrome is the same thing. All of it is we don't want to see one another. What is it? We don't want to see one another rise above. Same thing. How long? How long are we going to keep up this damn pretense? How long are we going to keep up this damn pretense, y'all? Riding around acting like you all this and but I ain't mad with nobody about what you got, but come back to your damn senses. It's your community. You got a whole cycle of